Hello, this is Christine Barton. You're watching Black T News. Hello, welcome to Black T News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we are going to be talking about the ACLU just making themselves look like fools. I mean, they tweeted out something upset. Well, they're upset because they just executed someone in Florida, and that person is a despicable person who did some pretty terrible things and was trying to get themselves sympathy by identifying as a woman, and which a lot of people are trying to do within like male prisons, to go ahead and identify as women so they can be in safer places or have their execution stayed and other stuff. So I'm going to bring up another example too, but they're being rightfully roasted for their position. So we're going to read a bit through the story. Thank God for community notes. That's a very good thing that Elon Musk brought to Twitter, which is now known as X, but I'm going to keep calling it Twitter until I guess it's unfashionable to do so. Also, CNBC did an article about people who put pronouns in their profile or on their resumes are less likely to get a job or get the callback or whatever. And are we surprised? I'm not surprised. And they're like, oh, this is a discrimination. It's like, well, people do look at your resumes and how it's written, and they'll make assessments. Like if you have a resume and there are typos, they're going to be like, this isn't very professional. If you have your pronouns listed, they might have the impression like, it kind of seems like they're self-centered. So we'll get to why I say that. But we'll talk about that. Also, the 2024 campaign with the primary anyway with Republicans is just getting so messy, particularly with some of the influencers on social media. And I have an example that I want to show and just vent a little bit, but we'll save that to the end, and hopefully we'll have enough time to get to it. Perhaps we will, perhaps we won't, because I'm going to go through these articles and they're going to take a minute. But before we jump into it, I'm going to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, different videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation to blacktnews.com/donate. Cost of stream, cost for my website and all that stuff. So if you would like to support in that way, God bless you. Appreciate it. Bible says have not because you ask not. So I am asking if you can support. Again, thank you very much. If you're watching on Facebook, you guys can send stars. If you're watching on YouTube, you guys can send super chats or super thanks. And I see you guys in the chat. I know there's people watching from different places. You guys can't see each other, but I do see your comments. And if you send a super chat, or I'll try to at least get to that. But if you I can't respond to every comment because I'm trying to like keep track of my thoughts and stuff. But I do see you guys. I appreciate you, and I appreciate those of you who come in later after it's live and watch it on your way home from work, etc. So God bless you again. You guys can go to the link in my description if you're interested in going to the event with Tucker Carlson. I will go ahead and play my short little ad that I made for it, so you guys can see a little bit of what's going on. Or maybe I delete. No, here it is. The biggest name in media is coming to Michigan for one day only. Tucker Carlson. See Tucker Carlson live September the 10th at Jimmy John's Field in Utica, Michigan. Visit Brighter MI for tickets starting at $50. Get your tickets at brightermi.com. So Tucker Carlson is coming to Michigan on Sunday. So I hope to see you guys if you're, in the area, if you're in Michigan, or maybe you want to travel from Ohio, maybe you want to travel from Illinois. Chicago's not too terribly far from, it's a couple hours, but where I am at, but come on down and come see Tucker Carlson. There's going to be a good concert as well. There's going to be scholarships. there's gonna be a scholarship recipient. There's gonna, celebrate and pay honor to first responders. So it's an event that Brighter Mission Pack has done for some time. Um, so I've been with them for, maybe this was my third year, maybe. Um, so maybe it is. And they just do a great job. And this is the biggest one that they've done with Tucker. So I want to make sure that it, you know, does well. When I would go in the Brighter Michigan Pack studio and I'd use it, I did not have to pay a dime. They really just wanted to uplift conservative voices, so they really did help my channel grow. I think at the time I definitely had no presence really on YouTube, and I had maybe about 10,000 followers on TikTok, and I just grew from there. And I appreciated the space. I needed the space to be able to do what I did, to grow. I was, my Facebook was doing better than my YouTube at the time, but so much of that is because of Brighter Mission Pack. So they're good peoples. They uplift conservative causes and conservative candidates, and I appreciate them. I already got a super chat in. Thank you very much. Shantae, thank you. I think that's how you say it. Thank you very much for the $10. I appreciate that very much. So, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, Brighter Mission Pack is a really good group. So I would love to make sure that they have a successful event. And it's cool to see Tucker. Also, please check out different articles and videos and stuff on my website as well. Check out different merchandise that I have. I'll just show a thing or two and get to getting, like the Constitution is a glorious liberty document. That's what Frederick Douglass said. We got black tea mug that you guys can get. We got the You Are Not That Special mug. I guess it's getting to the time where this is appropriate, because someone bought my sister some pumpkin spice coffee for her birthday, which was on Sunday. And so yeah, you can get your pumpkin spice season mugs if you'd like. Those are available at blacktnews.com. Maybe I'll give my sister one. She'll get a kick out of it. But yeah, her birthday was Sunday. She's 33 now. So once you reach 33, it's like, oh, you as old as Jesus. And once you're older than Jesus, it's you're older than Jesus. So it's funny. We're just a year apart. But they'll be like, ooh, you crispy, you know. Siblings are just funny that way. But we had a good time. We went out to, we had church obviously that day, and then we went to dinner, and then we watched Super Mario Brothers because my niece wanted to watch it, and kind of played my dad a bit to get him to rent it. And then my nephew was like flipping out, so happy. He's like, this is the greatest day of my life. And then he only watched it for like 20 minutes and then played Roblox. But I hadn't seen the movie, so I was glad to see it. It was fun. It was fun. But my older sister says she has the song Peaches stuck in her head. But it was the girls enjoyed it. Well, our nieces and stuff. So anyway, I don't have a meme for you guys, so I'm going to just jump right into the content. So ACLU, sometimes they can still have a good take. Sometimes they can still have a good take, but a lot of times their takes are just trash. A lot of times their takes are just trash. So this is an example of the trash take. So they tweeted out, Florida has executed Dwayne Owen. Now, the state of Florida provided never provided medically necessary gender affirming care to Dwayne Owen, causing her enormous suffering and violating her right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment for the more than 30 years she was in state custody. And community notes just pop, 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 pop. In 1984, Owen murdered and I don't even know if I want to say, I'll just say sexually assaulted or essay, because I don't want to say the heart. You guys can see the word. I just don't want it to get flagged. It'll probably get flagged anyway. But we'll just say essayed both a 14-year-old girl and a 38-year-old mother. Owen's lawyers argued insanity, psychiatric psychiatrists for the state testified that Owen faked schizophrenia and had no signs of gender dysphoria. His records indicate he exhibits sexual sadism. And they had another tweet that also got community noted. In legal papers she drafted, Owen wrote that she should be accorded to the essence of human dignity, to be allowed to become who she was meant to be before her death. No one should be killed by the state. The time to end the racist, unfair, and cruel death penalty is now. So they just repeated the same thing in the community notes. So people are coming at them. Jeremy Redfern, who's comms works comms for Ron DeSantis, you know, gave out the facts of this case and called them out for it. Will Chamberlain, had this meme here defending free speech because they don't really care about that too much. Sometimes they do. Sometimes it's a good take or two. Usually it's not. But defending free speech, defending a murderer's right to have plastic surgery at taxpayers' expense. That's what they're into nowadays. That's what they're into nowadays. So some people just flat out accuse them of being pro kitty touchers and all kinds of stuff. So the stuff that this person did was detestable. So let's just read a little bit from the CBS article, noting what happened, and we're going to contrast that to California, who got someone off death row thanks to Gavin Newsom, and that person is now in a woman's prison because that's what these people would like. They would like to go to identify as a woman, have an easier time in the female prison because they're not going to be as aggressive, obviously, as being with other men who are going to treat you like crap because you killed kids or you sexually assaulted kids or, did the nasty with elderly women or whatever you did. People tend to not treat you so nice in prison when you do crap like that. But that doesn't mean that you should get the escape hatch and go be with women in their prisons. And whether you assault them or, I don't know, consensually, there's women who've been impregnated because they've moved trans women into the women's prison. And then you just deal with other issues from there because then you have a pregnant inmate who's going to have a baby. So I mentioned yesterday when we talked about Yuri's video, if you didn't watch yesterday, and ideological subversion and how people can see something and just not believe the truth when they're so demoralized. You can show them all the evidence and they still won't be able to just acknowledge the truth. And that's where we are, as far as like the gender issue, the gender identity, transgenderism, all that stuff. We are hardline people not being able to accept reality with that at all. And that's what leads people to, there's so many advocates who are trans or not trans who will say like, yeah, these people need to be in women's prisons. Yeah, they need to be in women's spaces. But if it's just about how you identify, then why do you need to be in sex segregated spaces if gender is separate than sex? When people say that gender is separate from sex, the purpose isn't to actually keep them separate, it's to undermine sex. But that's what it's about. It's obviously about that. So no, this person did a terrible thing and they have now been executed. Now, as far as how I feel with the death penalty, I don't have strong feelings for it. Now, sometimes I hear stories that make me feel strong feelings about it, but how we do it, maybe it's because of all the appeals. Like I read an article like some years ago about how it's really expensive to put people on death row in the US. So we don't even do it well. I guess manage our funds or whatever well. Regarding it, there's also the possibility that the person going on death row is innocent, which is one of the reasons why you have so many appeals, because you want people to be able to make their case, because you don't want to execute the wrong person. So it's not a perfect process or by any means. So I don't have I can understand it for a lot of reasons. There's reasons to not be for it. But sometimes you hear a story and you're like, oh my gosh. Anyway, Florida executes Dwayne Owen for 1984 killings of teenage babysitter and mother of two. Again, I'm not going to say the R word. I'm just going to say like SA for like sexual assault, or maybe I'll just say sexual assault. A Florida man was executed Thursday for killing a 14-year-old babysitter and 38-year-old mother of two in separate attacks months apart in 1984, while children were sleeping in the homes he targeted. Dwayne Owen was pronounced dead at 6:14 after a lethal injection at a Florida state prison, according to Governor Ron DeSantis' office, one of the Florida's longest-held death row inmates. Owen was 23 at the time of the attacks and 62 when he was executed. This dude wants to be a woman, or thinks he's a woman. Owen declined to make a final statement. The procedure began at 6:01 p.m. with Owen's arms twitching and his breathing becoming heavier as the sedative took effect. The warden made sure Owen was unconscious before the lethal drugs were administered. Owen was sentenced to death for the March 24, 1984 SA and fatal stabbing of Karen Slattery, 14, for the R word, and deadly hammer attack 2 months later on Georgiana Warden, 38. Both killings occurred at Palm Beach County. Authorities said Owen attacked two other women in Palm Beach County who survived. All four attacks occurred just before and after Owen's 23rd birthday. Of the more than 290 people from Florida's death row, Owen was one of the longest held there. Besides his death sentences, he also received 6 life sentences. Several family members of the victims witnessed the execution. No one in the witness room spoke, but after the execution, Slattery's younger sister, Debbie Johnson, who sat in the front row, called Owen a coward. He didn't open his eyes, Johnson said. I know because I looked at them. Johnson, who works as a deputy in Florida Keys, was 10 years old when her sister died. With the rain today, I was really hoping I was going to see a rainbow, Johnson said, because that's what my mom always said. Whenever you see a rainbow, that's Karen smiling down on us, that there's no rainbow, but the rain will stop and she'll come through in her own way. Johnson said, closure is a myth, but justice is real. The state of Florida said he was supposed to die by lethal injection, and that is exactly what happened today. Johnson said he served his sentence. The end. And so, of course, again, Governor Ron DeSantis signed that, so he was able to be executed. Did a terrible thing. It's interesting that, people will bring up, guys know that I debate like pro-life issues and stuff a lot. And the number one thing that people will jump to is, what if a woman is sexually assaulted? As in, like, they can't have this baby because of what happened to this woman. Therefore, the baby should, because she should be able to live with that, or whatever. So they'll advocate that the baby should get the death penalty. But you ask, like, well, what do you think about the person who did it? And they're just like, oh, I don't support the death penalty. It's kind of like, why do you think the person who did the crime should get more dignity and respect afforded to them than the actual baby who's innocent? So it's interesting. Like, we all know this is a really terrible thing, but it seemed like, well, they said that they're a woman, so we have to stand up for this person who did this awful thing because they said that they're a woman and they're part of the umbrella that we have to stand up for. It's like, or this person got sentenced to this thing because they did a terrible, awful thing, and the end. And even if he had a surgery to try to be his authentic self as a woman, that's not his authentic self. His authentic self is a man. And whether he got breast implants or grew out his hair and had hormones and all those other kinds of different things, that's not going to reveal his authentic self. That's just going to alter his body. He's still going to be the same person who did these terrible things. And maybe getting all that done to himself is just the next step to trying to go to a woman's prison and hopefully not be sentenced to death and just buying time or whatever. So what a hill to, I don't know, die on for the ACLU rightfully being called out for their take on the matters, especially because the tweet and what they were advocating for didn't include the facts, and the community notes had to be the one who filled in those gaps. So once again, perhaps the community notes. Elon Musk had even said in the I think it was Elon and not a parody. It was like stop lying, or and then they added community notes or something, and it at least people know. At least people know. But I want to mirror that with what's happened in California, and this is from Redux. If you don't follow them at all, they do a lot of content regarding um, women's rights and different men going in women's spas and men going in women's prisons and those kinds of stories. So if someone's writing about it, it's usually Redux. So uh, this story is from July. I saw it some time ago. I maybe have alluded to it and mentioned it, but I haven't read the story to you guys. Man who beat two babies to death, allegedly awaiting breast implants at California women's prison. A sadistic man who beat two of his own infant children to death is now reportedly awaiting breast implants while at a women's prison in California. Jessica Marie Han, born Jason Michael Han, began identifying as a woman in 2019. Han was first arrested after the remains of his 10-week-old daughter, Montana, were discovered stuffed in a Tupperware container in Arkansas. I'm so sorry that this story is disgusting. The little girl's body was found and advanced in a state of decomposition and had been abandoned on board an RV trailer once owned by Han after the vehicle had been repossessed and sent to auction. The buyer of the RV discovered the body in February of 2002 and called the police. What a horrific thing to see. Montana's corpse had been in the plastic tub for approximately 1 year before she was found, and it was later determined that the baby had died of a fractured skull. Because Han's name had once been registered to the trailer, police were quickly able to connect him to the corpse. A multi state manhunt was launched, and Han was found living in a motel in Maine with his then partner, Chrissy Wirtz. Hans and Wirtz were arrested in April that same year. When found, Han and Wirtz were in custody of the 1-year-old child who reportedly on the brink of death. The infant had a number of severe physical injuries, including a dozen broken ribs, retinal hemorrhaging, bleeding under the skin, and internal damage. The child was immediately placed into protective custody and given appropriate medical treatment. During the course of the subsequent investigation, authorities linked Han to a storage locker in Arkansas. Once they had local police search, a second corpse was then discovered, one belonging to a 6-week-old son. Han was found to have been murdered by head trauma in 1999. It would later be learned that Han had kept and traveled with both of the corpses before finally storing them. In February of 2006, Han was sentenced to 27 to 30 years in prison in the case of his son's death, with his daughter's murder being tried separately. And in 2013, he would be handed the death penalty. Wirtz, the mother of the infants, was sentenced to 15 years for life for the death of her daughter, but avoided any charges in the death of her son. During her trial, it was learned that Wirtz had been under significant duress during the relationship, and that Han had threatened to murder her if she went to the police. Han was initially held on death row in San Quentin in the men's prison, while Wirtz was sent to the Central California Women's Facility, CCWF. In 2019, Han began to identify as a woman and was transferred within 1 year to death row at CCWF. But after California Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order suspending the death penalty in the state and mandating a stay on execution for all inmates on death row, Han was allowed to move into the women's general population after a cursory observation period. So Gavin Newsom, uh, he was on Sean Hannity the other day. They should ask him questions about this. I only saw a little bit. My sister, I kind of forgot about it. So my old when I dropped my older sister off for work today, and she's like, "Are you going to talk about that interview with Gavin Newsom and Sean Hannity?" I'm like, "Well, I only saw a little bit. I didn't really watch it yet." And then she was just so upset about. She's like, "I couldn't even watch all of it. It was disgusting." And she mentioned how Gavin Newsom was talking about COVID and trying to like praise Trump, and Gavin Newsom said something along the lines of like, "Well, I was praising him and that is true. Like at first, Cuomo and Newsom and some people weren't saying negative things about Trump. They were saying that that Pence, who was like spearheading like the operations, communicating with the governors and stuff, they were doing really well things. So that was a narrative at first, but it was election season, so people flip the script and change their tunes. So yeah, we remember that it was, maybe everybody doesn't remember that it was like you know cooperative at first. When the pandemic first started, though people were freaking out, I was optimistic. I'm like, oh, they're gonna build ships. They're gonna get ventilators and masks and all this stuff. And it seemed like people were on the move to try to solve the problem and work together and unity into crisis. And that didn't last long. You'd have the media that was asking questions like, what do you think about Trump? And I think it was Gavin Newsom who said, look, I know you guys want me to say something. Or it was either Newsom or it was Cuomo. And they're like, I know you want me to say something negative about Trump, but they're actually doing a good job. But that energy wasn't kept the whole time, and I'm not saying Trump did everything right the whole time, but eventually politics really, really kicked in. And of course, Gavin Newsom didn't do right by his state, very inconsistent with the policies, and he didn't even follow them himself, right? I'll never get over this video of this woman who had her restaurant closed down as she was arranging a protest. And so she went by her restaurant to pick up a couple things because she did all this work renovating so she could serve people outside, and then they still shut her down. And then she saw like in the next lot over or whatever, there's a catering company that's has stuff set up for a movie, and they're allowed to serve food. People work in a movie because we are talking about California. Movies have to go on, right? And so she was just like, I can't work, I can't provide for myself, but this is what they allow. Like, this isn't, how is this safe? But what I'm doing isn't safe. So that I think about that a lot during the writer strike too, and the writer strike and the Hollywood strike. I'm like, did you guys have this energy for people like her? People should advocate, for whatever they want to and fight for whatever they want to, but I can't not think about that woman and at the same time think about celebrities singing Imagine, and be like, stay home. Like, they're ruining our businesses with stay home. We're going to film, TV shows, like reality TV shows. Like, I loved The Masked Singer, and fond of some of the judges who, well, actually one of them follows me, but I was still like, they got a studio audience? Like, how do they have a studio audience? This doesn't make sense. But they had a studio audience at a time where I'm just like, COVID? Not saying that I thought that they should have been shut down, but I just noticed there were some things that weren't quite consistent in the world. So anyway, I think these are things that they need to ask Gavin Newsom. Like, what you're the one who decided. Fair enough, you don't believe in the death penalty. Guys like this don't get punished for, killing his infant children, but you know that this is a man who did these violent things, and they get to go to a female prison because now they're saying that they're female, or not female, but a woman. And again, what does it matter what your gender is? It's still not the same as your sex. if that's the way you want to play it. So why do you want to go into a sex segregated space? Why do you want to go into a sex segregated space? Some of the differences that we notice, and not all women are the same, not all men are the same, you know, but a lot of differences between men and women come down to not just how we're treated in society, but our physical bodies, that are things that happen because of our sex. So if you were a woman the whole time, why do you need to take drugs and alter your body, etc.? And okay, if you go ahead and do that, that still doesn't make you a woman or a female, at least. But again, when people tell you that sex and gender are separate, it's not because they actually want them to be separate. They want to undermine everything. Everything. And that's why someone like this can end up in this female prison after being so violent to the most fragile and innocent among us more than once. Fearing for her life, Horns filed an emergency transfer out of the institution and was granted a change in placement to the California Women's Facility just days before Han was turned loose. But now Han is reportedly awaiting a taxpayer subsidized breast augmentation. Speaking to Redux on the case, incarcerated women's advocate Annie Ichikawa alleges Han was quietly moved into the medical unit at CCWF earlier this year. Ichikawa, founder of Campaign for Women to Women, has been a vocal critic of gender self-identification policy in prison placement since Governor Gavin Newsom signed the SB 132 into law in 2021. SB 132, the Transgender Respect, Agency, and Dignity Act, formally established the right of inmates to be housed on the basis of gender identity. Since the act went into effect, 357 male inmates have requested transfer to a women's prison. According to Keep Prisons Single Sex USA, they had previously learned that 33.8% of men seeking transfer to the female estates are known to be registered sex offenders. Incarcerated women have been overlooked and forcibly made to be the losers of every political game possible when legislators need to dump a problem or sweep something under the rug out of the public's eye. Women in prison are now in the environment completely void of the opportunity to rehabilitate. They are in a state of constant hypervigilance, and long-term effects have resulted in mass CPTSD symptoms, she explains. They are quietly watching themselves being erased while men who have penises get facial feminization surgeries, laser hair removal, Adam's apple reductions, all paid for with your tax dollars. We live in a sick place. There's a bit more to that article, but you guys can go ahead and check that out. Again, that's Redux. They have a lot of articles like this because unfortunately, this is a big problem going on in our society that a lot of people are unaware of. But again, trans activists will advocate for. They'll be like, "Well, we're not safe in a men's prison," and then they'll say like, "Well, trans women are a lot safer than men or something," and it's like, "Bro, you are? Oh man, what are you talking about?" But the population of men who like trans women, as far as like being violent offenders versus sexual offenders versus like the whole population, it's not proportionate. There's definitely a lot of people who want to go to women's prisons to be protected from everybody else, because when you do really bad things in prison, people don't treat you so nice. That's true. But one of the reasons, because what you've done is particularly disgusting, but also they don't want to also have to deal with you being all, I don't know, disgusting to them. So they don't trust you, but they're the consequences of your own actions. Women should not have to bear the burden of your insanity. Prison is not a safe place. That's one of the reasons why people don't want to go. So whether you're male or female, but putting sex offenders, people who killed their children or other people, into the women's prisons, that doesn't make women more safe. Anyway, anyway, let's move on. Um, this story is a little funny. To me anyway. It's kind of the same subject, but a lot lighter. So CNBC decided to do a little test to see if there was discrimination for people who put pronouns in their resumes. And I'm not entirely surprised that their test had some results that showed that there was maybe some bias there, but they're saying it's because people are discriminating against the they them stuff and them being non-binary. But you have to realize when you're introducing yourself and you say these are my pronouns, I'm not going to use your pronouns in an average conversation with you. You know, if you're like, my pronouns are she her, I'm not going to, and I'm talking to you one on one, I'm not going to really use she her in a conversation normally. So when you are telling people your pronouns, you're telling them how you want other people to speak about you when you're not around. So it's not just about controlling how people perceive you, like deal with you in a 1v1 conversation. It's also how other people are going to project that image to the world. So if you say that your pronouns are they them and I'm talking about you to somebody else and I'm using they them or it's he him or whatever pronouns, I'm evangelizing your ideals. I'm evangelizing your ideals. And one, I don't want to participate, so I won't even do it in a 1v1 conversation, because I reject the ideology and I don't want to spread something that is false. So I don't want to be a participant. But even if I wanted to respect you for the 1v1 conversation, I'm definitely not going to spread your gospel around to other folks. So when you feel the need to include that on your resume, I think people are like, man, this person comes off a little bit difficult. Like people read into, resumes or how you write, how you arrange things all the time. People pay other folks to arrange their resumes to make them really good. So to better their chances of getting hired, before, there's people I know, before they send on a resume, like, hey, can you look at this? Hey, can you look at this? Like, you don't just send them out. So even though you can have the same information on different resumes, how you arrange that information can make a really big difference. So they did this test. Business.com also went a step further by sending out two identical phantom resumes to 180 unique job postings that were explicitly open to entry level candidates in an effort to test whether or not the inclusion of gender neutral pronouns impacts how employers perceive resumes. Both featured a gender ambiguous name, Taylor Williams. The only difference between the test and control resumes was the presence of gender pronouns on the test versions. The test resume included they them pronouns under the name of the header. She, her, and he, him pronouns were not tested. The phantom resume included pronouns received 8% less interest than the one without and fewer interview and phone screening invitations. Now, I'm going to be honest. 8% seems kind of low. 8% seems kind of low. Is that worth writing an article about? I about. I would expect it to be higher than 8%. Just to be frank. So the world is a lot more into the nonsense than I guess, I would like to hope, I suppose, but 8% again seems low. Like you could have a typo or two or something that will turn somebody off, or how your grammar is. So any little thing, once it's weighed up against other applicants, could be like, nah, I'm not interested. I'd rather take this person. People they'll find something to read into, especially if they have the pick of the litter. If they don't really, then that's another story. I think 8%, sounds kind of low. According to the report, over 64% of the companies that received these resumes were equal opportunity employers, something that made the results even more worrisome. The law makes it clear that you cannot base any employment decision, hiring, terminating, or otherwise based on their gender identity. It's incredibly disappointing and unethical that many of the hiring managers in our study would disqualify a candidate for being authentic. Is it authentic, or is it just needy and a little crazy? It's a little needy. I've seen so many videos of people crying because someone didn't respect their pronouns or whatever. And not just like straight white males or anything. Like, it'll be like older gay people, like, I'm not entertained. Like, it's I'm not playing the game. And then they'll just cry in their car. They're crying in their car. If you are a person who considers yourself to be non-binary, and it's like, if you use my pronouns, it's whatever, and you're kind of chillax about it, just know that the people crying in their cars for someone not using the pronouns gives a perception like, oh, these people are just kind of the worst, and who wants to deal with those emotions. But again, it's just 8%. It's just 8% according to their little test. So I don't feel like it's a remarkable kind of epidemic. Like, people, there are other things that people will discriminate, against, that are, far less fair. My brother, he was in a car accident some years ago. It was kind of feels like, I mean, I know it was a long time ago, but sometimes, thinking about how part of the time that was, kind of feels like yesterday. But he had um it was a car accident, and the collision with the car that hit them, the femur was like split into the shape of a T, and the force of the impact like broke his pelvis off, and so they had to drill holes in his legs and other stuff. Like, when they like drilled into his legs, his bones and stuff, that they didn't even have like medication that would be powerful enough to sedate him or anything. The best they could do is like give him a drug that would take his memory away of that pain. So it was really tough or whatever. So he went through rehab. He had, a lot of, I would say, miracles along the way. Had progress where doctors didn't think he was going to make, and also like some, I would say, divine timing of the best doctor in the country for that thing happened to be there for the surgery at that point in time. So it was a long process, but eventually he got to the point where he could like work again and stuff. And he had trouble finding a job, and then he didn't kind of realize it to some time later that I guess he was talking to somebody who was hiring, or just it dawned on him that when you have like a big apps, people don't like to see an absence of work history in your resume. And people will assume that you've been to jail. And my brother, he's not, I don't know, a hard looking dude or whatever. He's a big guy though, and I don't know what might have been in people's heads, but it just, he's like, that's, people told him like, yeah, they probably assumed that you had an absence in your work history because you weren't among us on the outside. Now he's never been to jail, but you don't put all that information on the resume about like, you got into this accident, that's why you didn't work X amount of, whatever. So people can and maybe that was it, maybe it's not, but it probably was. But who knows? People pass on resumes for all kinds of different reasons. People look you up on the internet to research you a little bit, especially if you have a public profile somewhere, your LinkedIn or your Facebook or your Twitter or something. So be careful what you post on the internet. But again, 8%, it doesn't seem like a very big deal to me. But hey, at least I'm surprised that it wasn't higher. I thought people would I thought that bias would be a little more baked in. Last thing I want to mention before I let you guys go is that I know it's primary season and people can be very nasty to one another in the campaigns and get pretty nasty to one another, and people can throw jabs. And I think, rigorous debate about policy is cool. I was never of the opinion that you should, slander folks and do unnecessary hits. And I mentioned some things the other day that different candidates were doing that I didn't like, or when I thought, well, for example, I thought it was a bad thing when the DeSantis team made a video about Trump and Fauci and COVID, and then they got highly criticized because they included, like, I think 2 images that were AI. And I'm like, you had all these other video clips. You have, Trump giving Fauci an award. We lived through 2020. We know that they shut down, and Trump, gave Kemp a hard time when he was reopening, and he just wasn't consistent. So you had some valid criticism. So why go the extra mile and use a fake, like 2 fake photos? There's plenty of stuff with Fauci next to Trump that they used. So why go that extra mile? So I didn't like that. I don't I don't like Vivek getting on the debate stage and being like, everyone else is a puppet or whatever, control, blah, blah, blah. And they won't tell you the truth. And then he goes on and says a position that I'm pretty sure just about everybody agrees with, particularly, about climate change agenda and the policies that cripple the economy being bad. But he still believes in climate change itself. So I'm like, yeah, most Republicans tend to have that position that we shouldn't just kind of destroy our economy for climate change. You don't have to go do that. They've all sold out. That's why I'm the only one who will tell you the truth. Let me tell you this thing now that we all agree with. It just bothers me. Okay. But what really bothers me is seeing like different influencers who are pro-Trump, pro-DeSantis or whatever. And I'll see like a lot of posts from pro-Trump people who say that the DeSantis people are so annoying and so terrible. And there's some DeSantis people who've called like Trump supporters low IQ and cult members and other stuff like that. And so I can understand the anger there. But some of these people were like, I don't even want to vote for DeSantis. I don't even like DeSantis anymore because of these people. They'll turn around and like say something negative that's out of pocket not even 2 hours later. So it's just seems like such faux outrage, such faux righteous indignation. I don't know how much of it is for clicks for Twitter, because they do pay people for engagement, and people engage and they're like, oh, you're a hypocrite, etc., blah, blah, blah. And what about this? And what about that? And I think it's great that on one hand that people are getting paid from Twitter for their engagement and their posts and stuff, especially if you use Twitter a lot. I don't have that sort of engagement yet where I've got to check or anything like that. I haven't reached that point. That's like my weakest sort of following, I think, on Twitter. Or maybe it's Instagram because I'm not on it a lot, but I'm on Twitter a lot, so I'll say that's probably my weakest following. But at the same time, people are incentivized to generate content that will make people react. And you just got to be careful. I'm advising you all to be careful about what people say and how they stir you up and how they stir up the people who don't like them. And because everything is about calculated. You know how articles would have crazy headlines, and maybe the article isn't quite what they say when you actually read the contents of it, or maybe you don't expect anyone to read it really, but you see the headline that said this thing and people don't actually read past the headline, but it's called clickbait. That's what people are essentially doing, I think, with some of their posts, because some of the things that are tweeted out, I don't know how you can call out one side and be angry and then you do worse. One of the worst perpetrators of like content just being awful is Laura Loomer. And she's a big Trump girl. She said, I'm not a Republican, I'm just a Trump person, or whatever, and it's only Trump, only I won't vote for anybody else, etc. At one point, it was reported that they considered hiring her, but I guess there was such kind of a negative reaction. But her and Trump were recently together, and he's promoting her. And so there's a post, a tweet that he had supported on Truth Social that I think is, pretty abhorrent. That's unbecoming of him. So it's this right here. So I'm going to go ahead and I don't know if I click on it that it'll follow it. No, it won't follow it. So I got to switch over to this other page so you guys can see what it led to. And it's this rant. She was on Tim Pool show debating Bill what's his name? I can't remember. It's Bill something, but he was a big Trump person, but he isn't pro Trump anymore, and he's pro. Now he's have said some, things about Trump supporters that have not been nice, but I by the way, she said much more awful things than what's about to be in this video. She's implicated, she's thrown out there that Casey DeSantis, Ron DeSantis' wife, has exaggerated her cancer when she had cancer or faked it or whatever. So she's like, well, I haven't seen any evidence. Like she should provide her medical records. And so she says some pretty awful things, and elevating someone like this is questionable. But I'll play this clip and then tell you why I think it's so problematic.
He pretended to be pro-Trump. He dressed his kids up in onesies. He ran campaign commercials saying that he was going to build the wall with my little toddler with Legos. He pretended to be a Trump mini-me, which is why people liked him and possibly considered him to be a potential heir apparent to Donald Trump.
And
when
he won
Donald
by
Trump
20 points 3 days after Trump called him Ron DeSanctimonious.
And then he lied to the voters of Florida. He said he wanted to be governor for another 4 years, and he stabbed Donald Trump, the man he owes his entire political career to, in the back.
All
right, hold on.
This is not the mafia.
So let's
He's an ingrate. He's an absolute ingrate.
Take a look at the answers.
And all the money in the world isn't going to buy him the personality transplant that he needs. Okay, he's on the spectrum, and he's never going to have the personality or charisma that Donald Trump has.
I agree with
He pretended to be pro-Trump. He dressed his kids.
She is right that Ron DeSantis came off as an alternative to Trump, just like more discipline and really well governing chops and stuff. So he and younger, obviously. So those things are true. I don't think they're not true anymore, but a lot of people's criticisms of Ron DeSantis is that he's a traitor, which I don't. They're politicians. They run. Trump isn't a king. they all audition. I'm not in covenant with this man. Did you guys make a covenant with the man? They all are like contractors, and they have to give the best pitch for why they're the best person for the job. So I think that reasoning is just ridiculous. But I played that because she accused Ron DeSantis of being on the spectrum, which people have thrown out there and accused before. Maybe she's the one who started it. I don't know. And maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but I would assume that he's not, and that's just a thing that they're saying. But that's obviously they're using that there is a negative, and Trump putting that on Truth Social isn't a good look, because immediately I think back to 2016, and there was a guy with a withered hand, and they're like, Trump mocked a guy with a disability. Now, the disability was just his withered hand. He was like a Pulitzer Prize winning writer. And I don't think a lot of people know the backstory to that. And Trump just kind of does gestures where they mock people, where he mocks people with like his hands and does stuff like that. So there's at least 3 other instances that people have shown to be like, hey, Trump just does that sometimes. But how they cut the ads on TV was they just slowed Trump down, like moving like that. And people, I think the perception that they wanted people to have was that this man was on the spectrum. So, and not just a man who had a withered hand. The reason why Trump had beef with him is because Trump had said something about, I think he saw people celebrating the towers, the Twin Towers fallen, and people like, that's not true. And Trump found a piece that verified what he'd said, and the person like denounced his article or something like that. So Trump was upset that this writer walked back his article just because Trump used it to elevate his position or justify it or whatever. So that was his beef with him and why he was calling him out. And so he just did some like, I don't know what I'm talking about, I can't remember, or something. And if you guys remember back to, I don't know how old you are, and I don't know if everybody's watching us from the US and watch the politics that closely, but they had ads everywhere about Trump coming after someone with a disability. So Trump elevating Laura Loomer and retweeting, or it's not retweet because it's on Truth Social, whatever they call it, truthing, or I don't know, coming at DeSantis saying he'll never win a primary because he's on the spectrum. It's just like, bro, make some better decisions. and in the end, maybe it won't matter because he's so far ahead of the polls. But one thing that does frustrate people who have left the train is that he's not correctable. And a lot of times he's not correctable because no one will really hold him accountable for stuff like that. And I just want him to do better and be better. And I want them all to do better and be better. Again, I just complained about a couple of different campaigns in the past couple of minutes. But holy cow. Why go down this road? And maybe a lot of folks aren't talking about it in the primary. Okay, does it mean it's not going to be a G thing again? And you can say, well, it didn't work before, back in 2016. Well, 2016 was a long time ago. Hillary Clinton was historically unpopular and people hated her guts. And people voted for Trump. Sure, they voted for Trump for all kinds of reasons, including the fact that they hated Hillary Clinton's guts. And then there are people who didn't come out for her. And I know somebody who's like a socialist who voted for Trump because they just thought he would, I don't know, be essentially pressing a reset button on humanity. And he just thought the system needed to burn down. And because I was so surprised when he told me he voted for Trump, and he's like, it's all going according to plan. And I'm just like, well, that's delusional because everything's going pretty well right now. But that's what he believed. That's what he believed. So I wonder how he feels about it now. And I'm assuming he probably voted. I don't know. He could have not voted for Biden in 2020, but I assume he probably wouldn't have voted for Trump again. I know people who voted straight party Republican ticket because they were mad how the DNC, treated Bernie Sanders. So there's a whole bunch of reasons to why Trump was elected in 2016. People did he was savage in that second debate with Hillary Clinton, which was great because he botched the first one. But that you'd be in jail, all that's amazing. And he did a good job in that third debate too. I think Scalia dying had a lot to do with the country coming together and rallying like, yeah, this is pretty serious. We need to save the Supreme Court. So I would just, even though Biden is historically unpopular, Trump is also someone who drives a lot of hatred into people. So Republicans and Democrats are both in this position where they just feel like their guy is not great, but no one will vote for the other guy. And so it's kind of like a game of chicken. And I would just prefer if Trump just cleaned himself up a bit more. That's what I'm asking for. You guys can agree or disagree. But again, I think that was kind of I think it was unbecoming of a former president and probably future president. But that's my opinion. And that's why you pop on by. Anyway, thank you guys for watching today. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, different videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate because it costs to stream, costs to run my website, all that stuff. So if you want to support in that kind of way, I very much do appreciate it. Thank you again for the super chat earlier today. I do appreciate it. You guys can give super thanks as well on Facebook. You guys can give stars, but there's a link to the website where you guys can donate. Please check out different merchandise that we have available at blacktnews.com. We do have my book, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion, that is available on Amazon. It's also available on Barnes & Noble, so you guys can check that out. There's other books that I have as well. I have 2 nonfiction books, but the rest of my books, I have 17 that are published altogether, are fiction books. So I have like a historical fiction, fantasy. Let me show you guys The Color of God's Eyes. Those are like my babies. I love them all, but imagine like the Civil War, but it's like X-Men powers and stuff like that. So just, very good synopsis and a very good story. You guys can go to blacktnews.com. If you go to the merchandise page, there's a link at the top that'll take you to my book website, but you guys can just search Christina Elbar on Amazon. Also have children's chapter books as well, so you guys can check out and read with your family or read or give them to the kids so they can read. I'm very appreciative of those of you who've purchased it and have said that they're your grandkids or your children have liked it and enjoyed it, and you guys have left good reviews. So again, thank you very much. And check out other merchandise at the store as well. God bless you guys, and I will see you all tomorrow. Don't forget about the Tucker Carlson event on Sunday, and I hope you guys will come, and I will see you there. God bless.